September 12, 2007. An online poker tournament is reaching its final moments. A player named POTRIPPER sits at the final table. At first, nothing feels unusual. Then the numbers begin to surface. He wins 56 of 93 hands. 8 players remain. He never loses a single showdown. For 20 straight minutes, he doesn't fold before the flop, unless his opponent is holding pocket queens or better. On the river, he faces 16 critical decisions. He gets all 16 right. Every raise, every fold, every call, perfect. Later, a mathematician studies the data. The probability of this performance occurring by chance, 1 in 10 to the 44th power. Not rare, not improbable, impossible. Days later, a customer support employee makes a mistake. Instead of sending a routine hand history, he sends the master file. 65,536 rows of raw tournament data. Every player's hole cards, every IP address, every observer account. Buried inside the spreadsheet is an account called User363. It followed POTRIPPER to every table, and it could see every card in play. The IP address traces back to Costa Rica, to Absolute Poker, to one of its founders, Scott Tom. 6 fraternity brothers built a $100 million poker empire from a basement in Seattle. Inside their software was a hidden account that could see every card on the table, and someone decided to use it. This is the true story of the biggest insider cheating scandal in online poker history. The story begins in the late 1990s at the University of Montana, where 6 members of the Sigma Alpha Epsilon fraternity hatched a plan that would make them almost billionaires. Scott Tom was a finance major who graduated in 2002, and he was the driving force behind everything that followed. Working from his father Phil's basement in Seattle, he assembled a business plan and recruited his fraternity brothers, his stepbrother Brent Beckley, Garen Gustafson, Shane Blackford, who had family money to invest, Pete Barovich, and Oscar Hilt Tatum IV, whose father was a prominent St. Petersburg, Florida dentist. None of them had any gaming industry experience. They were college kids with a dream, connections, and access to capital. Tom partnered with a South Korean software company to build the platform and secured a gambling license from the Kahnawake Gaming Commission in Quebec, Canada, a regulatory body created by a Native American reservation that existed primarily to license offshore gambling sites that couldn't operate legally in the United States. AbsolutePoker.com launched in 2003 with a $10,000 free roll tournament. Initial growth was glacial, roughly 10 new registrations per day. Cash games weren't taking off, so they hired prop players to sit at tables and generate action. People paid by the house to create the illusion of busy tables. The breakthrough came when they advertised on the Travel Channel's World Poker Tour. Registrations exploded from 20 per day to 2,000 per day overnight. Membership grew 40% per month for 3 consecutive years. By January 2005, Absolute Poker was the world's 5th largest online poker site by revenue, pulling in approximately $800,000 per day. By August 2006, the company was valued at roughly $100 million, with annual revenue exceeding $40 million. At its peak, the site generated over $1 million in daily profit. The founders moved operations to San Jose, Costa Rica, where they lived extravagantly. Luxury cars, bodyguards, private jets, beach houses. Tom and Gustafson were invited to the Playboy Mansion when they sponsored the 2006 Gumball 3000 rally. The company had over 300 employees and was preparing for an IPO that could have valued it in the billions. As author Ben Merzik later wrote, they were days away from being like Mark Zuckerberg. The corporate structure was deliberately opaque. After the Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act passed in October 2006, Absolute Poker was nominally sold for $1 million to Toquiro Enterprises, owned by Joseph Toquiro Norton. the former Grand Chief of the Mohawk Council of Kanawake and the same man who had created the Gaming Commission supposedly regulating these sites. Norton was a front. He received a monthly stipend while the fraternity brothers retained operational control. But buried in the software, hidden from every player and every regulator, was a tool that would destroy everything they built. During Absolute Poker's software development in 2003, engineers created a test account called User Number 363. It was one of the lowest numbered accounts on the platform, only the 363rd account ever created, and it had capabilities that no other account possessed. User 363 could observe any table on the site. It could see every player's hole cards in real time. It was designed as a debugging tool, a way for engineers to verify that pots were being distributed correctly and that the random number generator was functioning properly. But the account was never supposed to remain active in production. But it did, and someone used it to cheat. The scheme was elegant in its simplicity. The cheater would open account 363 as an observer on one computer, positioning at whatever table their playing account was seated at. The observer account displayed every player's hole cards in real time. Every hand, every card, everything hidden from every other player on the site became visible in plain text on the cheater's screen. It was like playing poker with a mirror behind your opponents. On a second computer, the cheater played under a regular account: POTRIPPER, Grey Cat, Steamroller, and Double Drag, making decisions with complete information. When opponents bluffed, the cheater called. When opponents held strong hands, the cheater folded. When opponents were weak, the cheater attacked. The decisions weren't good. They were perfect. To extract the stolen money, the cheating accounts would play heads-up matches against friends and family accounts and deliberately lose, a technique called chip dumping. The inactive player accounts used for cash-outs were obtained by changing passwords at the server level, hijacking dormant accounts that real players had abandoned. The money flowed out through these zombie accounts, making it nearly impossible to trace. When investigators later traced account 363's IP address, it led directly to Scott Tom's cable modem in Costa Rica. The email address linked to the account was scott@rivieraltd.com, and the domain pointed to a mail server hosted at a data center owned by Mohawk Internet Technologies. Absolute Poker's internal audit eventually identified 7 cheating accounts: POTRIPPER, Grey Cat, Steamroller, Double Drag, Pay Up, Supercard 55, and Ronaldo. The POTRIPPER account was traced to AJ Green, the company's former director of operations and reportedly Scott Tom's best friend. The September 2007 tournament was supposed to be routine. Marco Johnson, a 21-year-old playing under the screen name Crazy Marco, was a well-known online professional who had played thousands of tournaments. He made the final table, then the heads-up match, and lost to an account called POTRIPPER that had never accomplished anything. Something felt wrong. Johnson requested the hand history from Absolute Poker's customer support, a standard practice that sites provide so players can review their play. What happened next changed everything. A support employee accidentally sent him the master hand history file, a massive 10-megabyte Excel spreadsheet with 65,536 rows, the maximum Excel could hold at the time, containing complete data from the tournament across all tables. Every player's hole cards, every IP address, every email address, and every observer account that had watched. Johnson initially couldn't make sense of the garbled data. He had no idea what he was looking at, and overwhelmed by all of the information, he almost closed it and forgot about the file. Only after mentioning it to fellow players did anyone realize what it contained. Economist Stephen Levitt, of Freakonomics fame, later speculated the leak was intentional, a whistleblower inside Absolute Poker deliberately sending the evidence. The evidence was catastrophic. An observer account, User 363, had appeared at POTRIPPER's table starting from the third hand and followed POTRIPPER to every single table throughout the entire tournament. Both had Costa Rican IP addresses. POTRIPPER had played every single hand in the tournament without folding before the flop for 20 consecutive minutes after the observer account arrived. The only times he folded pre-flop were when opponents held pocket queens or better. He never lost a single showdown. On the river, he had decisions 16 times and won all 16, always raising when he had the best hand, always folding or bluffing when he didn't. He never once merely called. Mathematician Michael Shackelford, known as the Wizard of Odds, conducted a hand-by-hand analysis of 93 hands. POTRIPPER won 56 of them with an average of 8 players per hand, when expected wins for an average player would be roughly 11. The performance was 14 standard deviations above expectations, a probability of occurring by chance of 1 in 10 to the 44th power. Shackelford put it memorably: it would be easier to buy a lottery ticket in 6 different states and hit the jackpot all 6 times. Johnson shared the file with members of the 2+2 Poker Forum, and the online poker community launched what became one of the most remarkable crowdsourced investigations in internet history. The original thread was titled, "Beat, Absolute is actually rigged. Serious. Read me." And it was met initially with dismissive responses like, "Yawn, another rigged thread." But the evidence was overwhelming. Nat Aram, a former Deloitte Touche auditor, conducted the deepest analysis of the spreadsheet, tracing IP addresses and account information back to Absolute Poker's founders. Serge Ravich, a respected forum moderator and former attorney, examined poker tracker data and declared that what he saw did not make any sense. The account was simply winning too much money for the type of game he was playing, doing it by never having the worst hand. Michael Josem, an Australian computer security expert, created statistical analyses and video playbacks demonstrating the impossibility of POTRIPPER's results, work that was later featured on CBS's 60 Minutes. Todd Whittless had noticed suspicious play in cash games even before the tournament, specifically against an account called Grey Cat. This Grey Cat person was new, he later recalled, and at first, he seemed like a live one. He was playing in a style that was sure to lose, but he was killing the game day after day. The smoking gun was the observer account. User number 363 had followed POTRIPPER to every table, and the email address was traced to scott@rivieraltd.com. Within hours of this revelation circulating online, the DNS information for the rivieraltd.com domain was abruptly deleted, a panicked cover-up that only confirmed guilt. CBS News and 60 Minutes picked up the story. The scandal made international headlines, and investigators discovered that Absolute Poker wasn't the only site affected. Its sister site, Ultimate Bet, had been running the same scheme for even longer. Ultimate Bet was founded in 2001 by Greg Pearson using software from his company IE Logic. Like Absolute Poker, it had a God mode, internally called Divine Bet, and the primary cheater was Russ Hamilton, the 1994 World Series of Poker main event champion. Hamilton used observer accounts called Audit Monster 1 and Audit Monster 2 to see opponents' hole cards, and the cheating ran from June 2003 to January 2008, nearly 5 years. The two sites merged in November 2008 to form the Soraeus Poker Network, combining player pools under Absolute Poker's software engine. The connection ran deeper than corporate convenience. Pearson's IE Logic had originally supplied anti-fraud software to Absolute Poker when it launched, and both sites were licensed by the Kanawake Gaming Commission. The same debugging tool turned weapon existed in both platforms because they shared a common software lineage. The Kanawake Gaming Commission's investigation identified 23 cheating accounts using 117 different usernames and 31 individuals involved in transferring, laundering, or withdrawing stolen funds. The most infamous account, Neo, won over $600,000 before detection, winning 13 of its last 14 sessions and accumulating $135,000 in that stretch alone. Notable victims included Mike "the Mouth" Matusow, who lost over $1 million, his entire World Series winnings, after Hamilton personally called him to play heads up. Matusow later recounted, "All the money I won when I won the '05 World Series main event, I gave all to Russ to put on UB while he was playing me heads up and stealing it from me." Prahlad Freeman lost an estimated $3 million and described how the cheating warped his game. "When you're being cheated, you change your game. I stopped overbetting. I became nitty. No bluff worked." Actor Ben Affleck reportedly lost approximately $500,000. The definitive evidence emerged in May 2013, when Travis Makar, Russ Hamilton's personal computer technician, released secretly recorded audio from a 2008 meeting between Hamilton, Ultimate Bet founder Greg Pearson, and their attorneys Daniel Friedberg and Sanford Millar. On tape, Hamilton coldly declared, "I did take this money, and I'm not trying to make it right, so let's get that out of the way." The attorneys discussed strategies to minimize payback. Is the business willing to look for any reasonable way to limit this? Absolutely. Hamilton admitted to stealing between $16 and $18 million. Absolute Poker's response followed a predictable pattern: denial, then reluctant admission. On October 12, 2007, the company claimed there had been no security breach and insisted it was impossible for any person or program to see players' hole cards. 1 week later, an anonymous spokesman told NBC it was a geek who had tried to prove management wrong and simply went too far. On October 21st, Joe Norton confirmed the breach, blaming a high-ranking trusted consultant who had manipulated internal systems to view hole cards. Absolute Poker quietly struck a deal with the cheater, a full confession in exchange for anonymity. The Kanawake Gaming Commission later confirmed cheating over 6 weeks, beginning August 14, 2007. It also noted that company principals had deleted gaming logs during the investigation. The penalty? A $500,000 fine, 2 years probation, no public identification of the cheater. For Ultimate Bet, the commission named Russ Hamilton, fined the company $1.5 million, and ordered roughly $22 million in reimbursements. Critics pointed to the conflict. Joe Norton, head of the Gaming Commission, also owned both sites through Coverup Enterprises. As 60 Minutes reporter Steve Croft said, the companies effectively received a slap on the wrist. And in a final twist, Daniel Friedberg, the attorney involved in the Ultimate Bet cover-up strategy, later became Chief Regulatory Officer of FTX, another company at the center of a historic financial collapse. On April 15, 2011, a date the poker world calls Black Friday, the Department of Justice unsealed indictments in the United States versus Sheinberg. 11 individuals were charged, including Scott Tom and Brent Beckley from Absolute Poker, alongside PokerStars founder Isai Sheinberg and Full Tilt CEO Raymond Bitar. The charges included conspiracy to violate the Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act, operating an illegal gambling business, and conspiracy to commit bank fraud and wire fraud. The DOJ seized the domain names of the 3 major poker sites and froze approximately 76 bank accounts in 14 countries. Beckley pleaded guilty in December 2011 and was sentenced to 14 months in prison and a $300,000 fine, serving roughly 10 months at a federal work camp in Florence, Colorado. He later told the Montana Kaiman, "Now that I've pled guilty, been sentenced, and been to prison for it, yeah, I ran Absolute Poker." Scott Tom fled to Antigua, which lacks an extradition treaty with the United States, and lived as a fugitive for nearly 6 years, splitting time between Antigua and Barbados while holding citizenship in St. Kitts and Nevis. On February 23, 2017, he voluntarily surrendered in Manhattan federal court. In a deal that stunned the poker community, prosecutors accepted a guilty plea to a single misdemeanor, being an accessory after the fact in the transmission of wagering information. On September 28, 2017, Scott Tom was sentenced to 7 days in jail and a $300,000 fine. He was never criminally charged for the superuser cheating itself and was never compelled to repay stolen funds. Russ Hamilton, the ultimate bet mastermind who admitted on tape to stealing between $16 and $18 million, was never criminally prosecuted at all. Player compensation came years later, from an unexpected source. In April 2017, the DOJ launched a victim compensation program funded by PokerStars' $547 million forfeiture settlement. About $33.5 million was approved for roughly 7,400 absolute poker players in the first round. Combined with full tilt restitution, more than $150 million was eventually returned. But when the Surreus Poker Network collapsed, it owed around $50 million and had only $3 million left. Player funds had been spent on operations, refunds, and the founders' lifestyles. Many players never recovered their full balances. One detail captures the scale of it all. On September 12, 2007, the same day as the POTRIPPER tournament, a private jet carrying Scott Tom and his partners blew a tire during takeoff in Costa Rica. Authorities later found a bag containing $3 million in cash on board. The plane had been headed to Colombia. Days later, Tom was back at his computer. Todd Widless told the Washington Post, "Yeah, we were paid back, but they made absolutely no attempt to bring any of the people to justice. If someone stole that amount of money from a casino, they would be thrown in jail." On 60 Minutes, he added, "The scary thing is, there may be other accounts out there like this." 6 fraternity brothers built a billion-dollar empire from a basement in Seattle. They had the players, the platform, and the money flowing. Instead, they left behind a hidden account that could see every card on the table. Scott Tom served 7 days. Russ Hamilton served none. 14 standard deviations, 1 in 10 to the 44th power, and almost no consequences. If it happened once, what's stopping it from happening again?